Good afternoon, Emily. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, very good. Finally getting a little bit of sun from the window, which is never a bad thing.
I'm not jealous at all.
Well, look, thanks again for making it. For the benefit of the audience, it would be great if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, perfect. So my name's Emily Brooks. I'm a senior value consulting director at Seismic. I've been with Seismic for about 6 months. Prior to that, I was with a company called Workforce Software, who are now part of ADP.
Great. I won't ask you any details about the recently announced merger of
No.
Seismic and Highspot. We'll leave that. We'll leave that for another day offline. Well, look, I would love if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit. What are the kind of day-to-day activities that you do in business value at Seismic?
Yeah, so much like I guess probably the majority of the people that you speak to, really supporting the sales team and our prospective, and actually more so at the moment, our existing customer base with value realization. So supporting to understand where the value of our solution lies, where they're going to see impact, how it ties to their strategic goals and the business outcomes that they're looking to achieve. So yeah, really just diving a lot into the discovery of their current state, finding out what it is that they're trying to solve for by purchasing our software or expanding the footprint of our software, and yeah, really supporting our existing customers with understanding what impact we've had and how we can make our solution more sticky within their organization and make it more impactful.
That's become an increasingly hot topic, the whole concept of value realization, especially over the last few years, as organizations need to demonstrate that for retention, right?
Yes.
How
Yeah.
how have you seen the evolution of the demand for value realization?
I think in the current economic market, there's always going to be, competing priorities within organizations for projects. And so I think we've seen this, double click, as it were, on that value realization, really understanding where solutions are having impact, what business outcomes they are driving, and ensuring that that solution is something that they want to keep within their tech stack and that it really enables something special within their organization. So yeah, we certainly have seen a huge shift towards the value that's promised upfront in the sales cycle, the value that's delivered as part of the solution architecture or implementation, and then that coming out the other side of it, the value realization, and for people to understand, people who maybe don't touch the software, for them to understand where they're getting return on their investment. So yeah, it's been a really, I would say, quite an important shift in the last few years. And I think it is just as a result of competing priorities within organizations, things costing a lot more, people having to justify their investments.
It's interesting because value realization is the lagging indicator of everything that you do in terms of rollout, making sure that there's adoption,
Mhm.
but equally, it's probably the trickiest source of data because oftentimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but oftentimes the vendor actually doesn't house that information. That value delivery comes directly from the customer because that's not something that's really trackable in a day-to-day, in the same way that you can track usage,
Yeah.
weekly active usage, 4-week retention. How do you share that responsibility or accountability with your buyer to make sure that they are sharing that information so that you can calculate the value delivered?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I've worked with companies in the past who are very reticent to share that information and those KPIs, but I think it is just having a very strong, solid value plan, like a shared value plan and a perspective of, what KPIs are important, why they're important, and who is responsible for them. I think we're lucky at Seismic that the solution has been set up with a view to being able to report on some of those KPIs quite easily within the solution, so that we, whilst the responsibility might not lie on us as a vendor, that we have some visibility into that so that we can help our customers understand where they're seeing value. But certainly it's just, it's just educating our customers on, if you're wanting to justify this investment moving forward as an ongoing investment that the company is going to consider, then you need to be able to point to these things. And we can give them some advice on, what other customers have done and how they've tracked those things in our experience. So it is just one of those balancing acts. And I think we find customers who are quite keen to share the outcome with us, and they're quite happy to say, do you know, we were doing it so wrong before, and we're doing it so brilliantly well now with your solution. And then there are other customers who are quite reticent to do that. I think my previous company, it was really around workforce management and time and attendance, and there was a lot of risk mitigation. And so people
Right.
didn't want to talk about the grievances that had been filed and the lawsuits that had been settled. They didn't want to share that, which is understandable. But just letting them know that this is something that you should be looking at. Whether you want to write it down or not is a different thing. But it's certainly something you should have an eye on for sure.
And does it tend to be the same stakeholder? So the individual, imagine during the sale, there's a champion who kind of owns the internal assessment of solutions, decides to buy seismic, sign the contract. Are they the ones that then continue to be your point of contact to measure the value? Or do they hand it over to somebody else in the way maybe sales will hand it over to customer success on the vendor side?
Yeah, I would say usually that person's, interested as a stakeholder. The people that we are engaging with, they're invested in it as a stakeholder. So more and more in the European market, we're seeing more of that enablement function within an organization. So someone's specifically in charge of revenue enablement or go-to-market or sales enablement. And they are often the person that's tasked with finding a solution that's going to fit for the requirements. I would say on a day-to-day, they're the person that is a stakeholder within that organization, but they're probably not the content, the program manager or the software manager. I think we're seeing, a lot more cooks in the kitchen, as it were. But I think it is important, again, for us to be able to report back to those people that, you bought this software because you're expecting these outcomes, and we're proving that we're able to support those outcomes.
And so you get multiple stakeholders involved. And what do you use any specific tooling for that, or do you still use something like Excel?
For our internal side of things, we use Seismic's own software to create,
Right.
a lot of the value outputs, the value realization reports. We've automated within our own software, which is fantastic.
Sure.
We're definitely seeing a shift towards additional metrics that people are wanting to see. Definitely looking for being able to report on different things. I think it's also very interesting where we've got, agreements and relationships with other partners. So people like Microsoft, Salesforce, those sorts of people, to get information out of their software as well.
I find that because we've got a platform for value selling and realization.
Yeah.
What we find is when organizations use it with their customers, oftentimes there's outcomes that they didn't even foresee in the original business case, right? Because you learn about other areas of, I think to your point, there may be some of the softer benefits that you had never considered, but equally for certain stakeholders are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's also, I always say that when we do value consulting, any time we create a business case or a value assessment, a strategic value assessment, there's a forecast of future benefit. We have, we are dependent on
quite hypothesis.
Yes, exactly. We're dependent on the company being, able to implement the software. We're focusing on, what we've been told in the sales process, but actually the reality might be something different. And sometimes those auxiliary benefits come up, and actually sometimes they are fantastic things to hang your hat on.
Do you find that can also inform then internally the business, like product marketing, around new elements that you want to communicate the product is delivering? Because a lot of the time, as a product builder ourselves at Symbi, we oftentimes maybe overlook some of the smaller but equally important benefits that users get from using the tool, because we're always thinking about the headline ones like increase win rate, accelerate sales cycles. Yeah. But for some of the sales reps, I saved so much time doing this.
Yeah. And I think that actually has had a big impact on our success in certain verticals. So we are very successful in financial services, and I think that was partially as a result of us being able to realize that we could automate some of those really important things like fund reports, and that the amount of time that gets saved out of that. I don't think that was necessarily the initial
Yeah.
The initial plan when Doug and the co-founders were creating Seismic, but it certainly was a very beneficial thing for us to find out, and actually has proved to be one of the reasons why we're extremely successful in that market. So yeah,
For
I
sure.
think, broadly, go-to-market teams have similar challenges. They are wanting to be more efficient. They are wanting to be, providing their customers with the right information. But there are certain things within certain verticals that are definitely niche and come out as a result of some of our assessments and our implementations that we had never foreseen. So, yeah.
Brilliant. And do you have you don't have to give me the specific number, but do you have a level, a percentage improvement on retention for accounts that have value realization, embedded versus those where maybe the customer simply doesn't want to or is reticent to share the information?
Yeah, I think it's, again, a question of customer maturity as well, and
Mm.
our evolution into being more of a platform rather than, point solutions. I would say that where we've got some really sticky use cases, those are the areas, and that tends to be where customers have taken the full platform from Seismic. That's where we have higher retention. And so obviously, as a result, it informs where our sales teams and our customer success teams should be spending their time and thinking about, whether there's churn within an account because they don't have particularly sticky use cases. But I would say, that's an ever evolving thing within the market. And I don't think that Seismic is unique in that sense, that we're now starting to really think about where that value realization is having impact and making sure that we're demonstrating that, and hopefully, retaining our customers as a result.
Fascinating. Moving beyond the value realization piece, in your job now, you've been for about 10 years in the value space. How has, I have to ask this question, but how has now the introduction of a lot of the Gen AI tools impacted your ability to maybe scale more of your work? And what are some of the risks that you see in, just for context, I think from a value perspective, precision is so important to the work that you do in sharing as precise a hypothesis as possible. There's no room for hallucinations in the space that you or even we operate. And so how have you kind of adopted AI tooling in the day-to-day or even periphery to enhance productivity or even quality?
Yeah, I think where I've utilized it most has been that research. I don't think that's particularly surprising for anybody
Yeah.
in the kind of consultative space. I think,
It's a huge time saver,
yeah,
that in itself,
huge
right?
time saver. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a really important stuff that comes out of people's company reports, really vitally important stuff. But a lot of the time they are 70, 80 pages of, a lot of financial information that maybe isn't as pertinent to us. I think utilizing AI solutions to be able to kind of reduce the time that's spent on research allows us to be much more consultative, much more hyper-focused on what a customer is looking to achieve. One of the things that I've also found that's been really helpful is trying to put stuff in the language of the customer, right? So each customer is going to have a different way of speaking and a different way that they position their own value proposition. And I think it's really interesting to be able to mirror some of that language and make sure that we're not using language that they wouldn't, maybe that they've purposely moved away from because it doesn't
Right.
cover what they do appropriately. So I think that's been one of those areas. I think, there's a lot that AI can do, but I think, like you say, where we have to be really specific with some of the numbers that are coming out, I think I would rely on AI to give me a first draft of something and then, probably be a little bit more, I'd probably be a little bit more forensic about what gets spat out of an AI tool than I would be of working out myself, as it were.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's easier with AI because it comes up with that first example and you're able to kind of break it down. But whereas sometimes if you're doing your own workings, it can be really difficult to figure out where you've gone wrong. I think also that peer-to-peer review, I think that's always been really, really important in any job that I've done, is making sure that I've got peers review what I'm doing and what I am putting in front of customers. I think sometimes AI can be helpful to have a look over that and make sure that you've not, made any glaringly obvious errors, so that you're actually relying on your peers a little bit less for that kind of work.
And where does that, in terms of the overall reach of the business value practice, what percentage of deals are you able to cover across the organization?
I think this is one of those ever-enduring challenges that most market teams have.
Scalability is a challenge, right?
Scalability, being able to be within opportunities and have those really highly focused, high quality engagements with your customers. It's very difficult to scale that across, every single deal that you're working on, across the mid-market, across, enterprise level deals. I would say that historically, it would probably be like an 80% of anything that we would consider enterprise level would have some type of value consulting function overlaying over the top of it. That would be ideal.
Yeah.
But the reality sometimes look a little bit different, because a lot of, sometimes it doesn't necessarily follow that the dollar value of something is going to give you how much work you're putting into it, and vice versa. So, and I actually think sometimes the benefit of working with those smaller deals can actually be, from the customer's perspective, it can almost be more valuable, because a lot of those times those people won't have bought software before. They certainly won't have bought enablement software before. So guiding them through that process of what we've seen and the tips and tricks that we've learned over the years can be really, really helpful. So scalability is an ever challenge, for an ever enduring challenge, I think, for every go-to-market function. But I think that the focus should always be on that high quality engagement, early doors with the most important customers, the most important prospects.
That high volume segment always tends to suffer for that reason, right? Because every segment needs to sell on value, irrespective of the size, right? Because value always wins. The challenge, of course, is how do you scale a value motion when sales reps have 15 deals per month they're trying to cover, right? That's always and of course tooling can help, but I think there's always a scalability issue from a value consulting, and companies obviously need to focus the very precious resource on those strategic deals. Really fascinating.
Absolutely. And I think there's tended to be a historical thought that value means numbers. It means, an ROI number. It means something that you can spit out of a calculator. But we all know that actually the value in value consulting is the consulting piece, right? And being able to understand why and how a customer's moving towards a new purchase and why they're looking at something new and how we're going to impact that. The number kind of comes as but not an afterthought. That's probably not the right way to think about it. But it's a byproduct, I think, of that.
It's a result. It's a result of that consultative process, and because ultimately it's kind of going to qualify in or out, right? If through this process of understanding the pain points and sharing the value of solving for that pain, you both agree that number is viable, then everything that you did on your way to get to that number just is the evidence behind it, right? It lends the credibility to it.
Absolutely. And I think if you throw a number up in front of someone that doesn't have any credibility underneath it, it completely undermines the whole process, and does the exact opposite of what you're trying to do. So.
And that's a challenge. I think LLMs are obviously excellent for a lot of stuff. And actually, I've seen some really cool, gems or any output on Claude or ChatGPT that can get you 85% of the way there. That last 15% is crucial to building that credibility. And if any of the other stuff is even slightly incorrect, you've lost all the credibility and the right to build that with your customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
On a final note, I do want to ask you two relatively uncomfortable questions, if you wouldn't mind. Something that we ask all of our guests. Everybody gets a little bit jumpy. So in your career in value consulting, I'm sure you worked with some phenomenal people. Who's the best value consultant you worked with?
I would say my previous manager, purely just for the fact that she sort of taught me the craft, I guess, and taught me how to approach things. Kathy at now ADP has just been a fantastic mentor to me. Has been that person that I've been able to bounce ideas off, has given me direction, and watching her do her thing was the most incredible way to learn how to be a good value consultant and someone that's going to add value to every conversation that we're having with our customers. So yeah, she definitely would be up there.
Something of a mentor.
Yes, absolutely. Even now, I still speak to her, and I hope that continues. Even though I've obviously moved on, but yeah, she was super happy for me to take a new opportunity. Yeah, absolutely a mentor, and hopefully something that I can provide to someone else within the within the marketplace at some point in the future as well.
And in your partnership with, I'm sure, many account execs, who's been the best one you worked with?
I would say this is a really difficult question because I feel like if I don't say anybody else, they'll all be like, "Well, hang on a minute, why didn't you say me?"
You can name more than one. You can name
yeah, no, I think there's been a few. I think when I was at Workforce Software, which is now ADP, I worked with an account exec called Mark, and he was fantastic. He would just bring us in at the earliest opportunity. And my favorite question that he always used to have for our team was, do you have any nuggets for me? Any really good nuggets of information? And he was really keen to drop those value nuggets, as it were, into every single conversation. And so I think from a consistency and a strategy perspective, he was definitely up there as one of the most impressive enterprise salespeople that I've had the pleasure of working with. That being said, everybody that I've worked with has been, great. But no, I think anybody who realizes that, involving a value consultant early and often is going to be successful, and other people that I would point to is doing the job really well and being very successful as a salesperson in today's market.
Amazing. Emily, thank you so much. I really enjoyed today's conversation.
Thank you. It was great to speak to you. Thank you for having me.